All right, obviously, John Cromer, Andrew Cazana, we did our capstone together, and we repaired a John boat.
So one of the most difficult parts of actually, finding our passion and finding what we want to do for our capstone is, finding something that we can, that we're passionate about. And we share a passion of cars, anything with a motor, really. We wanted to do something or have something where we can go and have fun during the summer and just, really spend the last few months together as friends doing something that we both enjoy. So at first we were thinking about a old Mazda that we wanted to refurbish. And then we moved on like, hey, what about motorcycles? They require less mechanical know-how, they're less expensive. Unfortunately, parents were like, no, that's too unsafe. Yeah. So we're like, what can we do? We waited a few weeks. John discovered his cousin's old boat down at their farm. And we did a little research and we discovered that they had the right mechanical know-how to do it. It wasn't too difficult, but it was difficult enough to present a challenge. So we decided to restore a 1980s aluminum job boat.
Right, and like you said, it was my cousin's actually down in a farm in Forsyth, Georgia. And he had, back in probably the 80s or 90s, had taken out 2 or 3 benches from the boat, and it wasn't floating at that point. So they had started using it almost as a dumpster at the farm. And so it needed new rivets, like I said, 3 benches, and we had to detach 2 seats and attach 2 more. And then we really wanted a new motor because it had one, but it was barely working. And then we needed a battery and paint. And like I said, they had been using it as a dumpster. You can see in this picture, they have barbed wire, and that was after clearing stuff out of it. So they had just been dumping stuff in, and it had a broken trailer. So one of the harder parts was fixing the trailer before we could take it 4.5 hours from Forsyth to Knoxville. So what we ended up having to do was take that to a professional just for safety to make sure that it wouldn't break on us on a 4.5-hour ride. And that was one of the main challenges in the beginning, but even before that, I was a little worried because we didn't have any experience working on boats. I'd never really been on a boat that much in my life, so that was one of the things that I was a little nervous about starting off.
So the research was an integral part of actually building the boat. We had to find the right tools. Our biggest tool was the rivet gun. Rivet gun's a very simple tool. It's pressure-based. You stick a rivet, which I'll talk about later, and basically pump the rivet into the holes that keep the boat from sinking, and riveting aluminum parts together like the benches into the boat. Equipment like seats and the battery and the trolling motor we used all required, are they from the same brand? What price points are these? Because we were on a constrained budget. And measurements, especially with the rivets. Over time, the holes in the boat expanded or got malformed, so we had to we ordered about, I think, 2 or 3 different types of rivets to see which ones actually fit.
Yeah, and then one of our main problems was getting these seats off. They had been bolted in, had a piece of wood in between them, and as you can see, they're really rusty. So we tried getting a wrench, tried taking it off with that, struggling with that. So we ended up trying to slice each of the 4 bolts off of the seats, and that took about an hour to get halfway, and we realized after that we had been using some of the wrong tools, and after we got the right tools, we got them off in about half an hour. So I think that was one of the things we made a lot of mistakes with, was not using the right tools when we should have been, and that created a lot of problems.
So rivets. This is what you see here are all the holes where the rivets fell out over the years. These required aluminum 1/4 inch aluminum rivets, waterproof rivets, which were actually very hard to find on the internet. Only one website carried them, and they were a much higher price than any of the other rivets on the website. There were about 134 total that we had to rivet in over the course of about 8 hours one night. It was a lot of riveting. And it keeps the boat afloat. If one rivet is incorrect or messed up, it can spring a very large leak. So we spent a lot of time doing it correctly. Another problem is that each time we would rivet, about every other rivet, the mandrel, which is the thing you stick in the rivet gun, would clog up our rivet guns. So we had to go back and then use an electric drill to drill out the hole. so we can unclog it and use it again and again and again. So that was we learned a lot about persistence and, you know, just keep trying, no matter how annoying it was.
Yeah, and then, like I said, the trailer initially was in pretty bad shape, and we had a professional fix it. But one of the things that we also had to do was attach the brake lights, and that was kind of hard to do because I had never done anything with wiring, and so we had to run it all the way from the back of our car through the boat and then to the back of the boat and attach them there. And it was really hard. It took about 25 minutes after hooking them and re-hooking them, because when you use the boat, you have to take them off, and then when you take it out, you got to put them back on. And so it was a lot of trying to get them to stay grounded, trying to get them to work, and a lot of testing with that. And another problem with the trailer was that the wheel bearing had come loose, and so it was hard to get we initially were able to use the trailer, but it's something we had to replace to keep it going in the long run.
So my experience was really, really great. I learned a lot about friendship and teamwork with John, and having these last few months together with him, working on a joint project like this really bonded us further than I'd ever actually really expect. Persistence, as I mentioned before, especially with the rivets. It was really annoying spending 8 hours on the weekend, just working with your hands. Isn't that much fun? But in the long run, it was really awesome to go out and like just enjoy God's beauty on the lake.
Yeah, my experience was a lot of fun too, and I'm going into engineering, so one thing I really like is problem solving, and I think that's what I loved having experience with this, is that I had options for creative problem solving. For example, our trolling motor had to clamp onto the boat, and the back of the boat had a little lip, so I had to find a way to make it even with the boat so it could clamp on. So I had to find some scrap wood, some bolts, and be able to like slide it in there and keep it clamped on. So I think I actually enjoyed that. I thought it was a lot of fun finding creative ways to solve problems, which is another thing with mechanical work. And for the future, being an engineer, I've been trying to figure out what kind of engineering I want to go into. And I think this is actually, it's a little taste of mechanical engineering, not quite as complex, but I think this was a good way for me to somewhat experience that before college. And I'm actually really excited about going to that now. And we have a video of some of the process we had. I'm going to hope it works because it was messing up a little bit last night. So, let's see. Yeah, so obviously, initial picture of the boat, like we said, it was really run down. They've been kind of using it as a dumpster. I think the next picture should come up, like you've seen that before. And so here's where the benches had to come in. You can see this is a big empty spot, and you had to rivet in all of these to put each of the 3 benches in. And this is us trying to saw off the boat's bolts, and that took a very long time. And here's a time lapse of us riveting all the things. So here's the front bench, and you can see every time we go to this workbench over here is when we had to come in and unclog the rivet guns. So I think this is initially when we figured out that was a problem. So we were fiddling with that a lot, trying to drill it, getting those stuck for a while, and that really added on to the time that it took to get the rivets in.
Even a problem with this was this isn't actually the whole time we were working on this. I mean, you can see that it's fading to dark pretty quickly outside, but I think this stopped right when we went to go get dinner, and we had to we spent 2 or 3 more hours on the back of the boat under it. It was a pretty long process.
And there's a couple more clips of the time lapse, and I'll speed that along. So here's us going underneath the boat to attach the back 2 benches, and that started to hurt our necks and backs a little bit, trying to get underneath the boat and attach all those 135 rivets. And so even after all that work, it still started to leak. So to water test it, we filled it up with water completely, and there were still a lot of leaks. So after that, we had to go in, had to drill through all the leaking rivets and re-rivet those. And then we water tested it again, realized that those were still leaking. So we put in new rivets and then had to buy a leak solvent or a leak repair to glue them together. And another problem was that the stickers on there for registering the boat were really hard to get off. You couldn't peel them off, and we tried sanding them, but that took a very long time. So eventually we had to resort to burning them off and peeling them off with a razor blade, which should come up in a minute. Yeah. And so that ended up taking not near as much time as sanding them off, which was really nice, but kind of dangerous because kind of burned our hands a little bit sometimes on the aluminum and the razor blade. And then our first journey taking it out should be coming up. If I can get that.
We had a lot of fun today on this day. It was April 18th. April?
I think April 18th.
And it was a really nice, sunny day. And we were trying to make it to this island way out there. And so we decided to do a little interview while on the water about our thing. So it's kind of just we talk about, what we liked about this, what we learned.
Yeah, and we had some leak in the back after even getting on the water. It didn't end up being a problem, but it had probably gotten to about an inch and a half of water by the time we got back.
And it actually ended up tilting the boat to the left, which was kind of frightening. But yeah, we actually it was a pretty expensive project. Luckily, my grandparents were gracious enough to let me use my art fund. They basically save up for each grandchild if they ever want to do something that they're passionate about, that involves their hands, creativity. They save up for a few $100s. So I was able to use that, and we also paid out of pocket to buy all this equipment.
And so after we'd gotten about a fourth of the way to the island, we looked at the battery percentage, and it had already gone below halfway. So I think we overestimated how much the battery was going to do. It was really trolling motors really meant to take you a little bit short just for fishing, and we were going on a big adventure. So I mean, I think that was one of the good things about testing, obviously, is that we know what the problems are, know what not to do. But it was just a funny little thing that happened. And we kept on going towards the island, but eventually got to a certain point where we had to turn back because we knew we weren't going to make it back.
We actually brought paddles along from canoes to paddle back. They weren't very effective with a 14-foot aluminum John boat.
Especially against the current.
Yeah, especially against the current. But we actually made it back to our dock pretty easily, still with a little bit of battery in it. We probably would have made it to the island, but it was our first voyage, so now we know. And we're actually planning to buy another battery and so that we can go further on the boat. We're really looking forward to just enjoying nature, enjoying the lake on our John boat with a bunch of our friends before we have to head to college, fishing and other things like that.
And that's pretty much it.